The Law of the Hunter's Empty Plate. In a village that shimmered in the heat, nestled between a great green forest and a wide, generous river, lived a man known to all as Mr. Spider. He was a clever man, quick with his words and even quicker with his schemes, but his heart was knotted with a single tangled thread: greed. This greed was a hunger that no amount of food or fortune could ever satisfy. Mr. Spider had a large family to feed, a wise and patient wife, 4 strong sons, and 3 clever daughters, and they often went out together to hunt in the forest or cast their nets in the river. Here, however, lay the source of Mr. Spider's greatest frustration. Though he considered himself the most skilled hunter in the village, fortune never seemed to agree. When the family went to the river, his wife's net would flash in the sun and come up heavy with glistening silver fish. His sons would spear catfish in the reeds with unerring accuracy, but Mr. Spider's own net would snag on sunken logs or come up filled with nothing but mud and weeds. In the forest, his children could track a durka for miles and bring it down with a single well-aimed arrow, while Mr. Spider would trip over roots and startle every creature for miles around with his loud and clumsy pursuit. Night after night he would sit by the fire, his stomach full but his pride empty, watching his family share the bounty that he had failed to provide. The taste of the delicious roasted meat turned to ash in his mouth, for it was a testament to his failure. His greed twisted into a bitter jealousy, and one evening he could bear it no longer. He stood up, his shadow dancing large and imposing in the firelight, and struck his staff upon the ground for silence. "From this day forward," he declared, his voice booming with false authority, "I am making a new law for this household. It is a law of fairness and principle. Whosoever catches a fish or kills an animal shall not be allowed to eat any of it. The hunter's reward will be the pride of their skill, not the filling of their belly. The rest of us, who were not so fortunate, will eat the meal." His wife and children stared at him, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. They saw the law for what it was, a punishment for their success, born from his own wounded pride. But he was the head of the family, and his word was absolute, so they nodded in silent, reluctant agreement. The law cast a long shadow over the Spider household. For many years, the joy of the hunt was gone. When a son brought home a plump guinea fowl, he would have to sit with an empty plate and watch his siblings and parents eat, the delicious aroma a torment. When his wife caught a magnificent fish, she would serve it to everyone with a gracious smile, but her own portion would be nothing but rice. The family learned to be quiet about their successes, their triumphs now a source of awkwardness and pity for the one who had provided. One day, many years later, Mr. Spider was walking home from a neighbouring town where he had been visiting his elderly parents. The journey was long and the sun was hot. As he passed through a dense thicket of trees, he suddenly stopped. There, not 20 paces from him, stood a magnificent elephant, its great ears fanning slowly in the heat. It was the largest creature he had ever seen. In a flash of pure, unthinking instinct, the hunter within him took over. He raised his spear, aimed for a spot behind the great beast's shoulder, and threw it with all his might. The elephant trumpeted once, a sound of shock and pain, and then crashed to the ground. Mr. Spider's heart swelled with an immense, triumphant pride. He, and he alone, had brought down an elephant. There would be enough meat to feed his family for weeks, and his name would be sung as the greatest hunter the village had ever known. He began to happily drag the colossal animal towards his home, his mind already savouring the taste of victory. Then he stopped. A cold dread washed over him, extinguishing the fire of his pride. He remembered the law, his law. Whosoever kills an animal shall not be allowed to eat any of it. He, the great hunter, had caught himself in his own trap. He could not possibly let this prize go to waste, but how could he escape the foolish decree he had made so many years ago? His cunning mind began to spin a new web. He dragged the elephant to the bank of the river, about 3 blocks from his house, and hid it behind a cluster of tall reeds. Then he rushed home, panting as if from exhaustion. "Water," he gasped, collapsing into a chair. "I am dying of thirst. My oldest sons, run to the riverbank and fetch me some fresh, cool water." His wife looked at the full clay pot in the corner of the room. "But, husband," she said calmly, "the children just brought fresh water from the well. Here, drink this." "No," Mr. Spider insisted, waving it away dramatically. "It must be water from the river, from that specific spot by the tall reeds. Only that will quench this terrible thirst. Go now." The older boys, sensing something was amiss, exchanged a knowing glance and went to the river. A few minutes later, they returned with the water. "Did you see anything unusual by the riverbank?" Mr. Spider asked, trying to sound casual as he drank. "No, father," they replied in unison, their faces perfectly blank. "Nothing at all." They went straight to their mother and whispered what they had seen and how they suspected their father was trying to trick them into discovering his kill. A quiet agreement was made. The whole family would play along. Fuming, Mr. Spider waited an hour and then sent his other, younger sons out on a different errand, having first dragged the elephant even closer to the house. "Go and gather firewood from the edge of the forest," he commanded, "and be sure you look carefully along the path." They too returned with the wood, and when he asked them if they had seen anything, they simply shook their heads and said no. Now desperate, Mr. Spider heaved and pulled and dragged the elephant right into his own backyard, placing it directly beneath his bedroom window. He went inside and found his wife. "My dear," he said with a strained smile, "the backyard is looking terribly messy. Could you please go and give it a good sweep?" His wife, a model of obedience, picked up her broom and went outside. Mr. Spider watched from the window as she swept the entire yard. She swept around the elephant's giant feet. She swept under its belly. She swept the dust right off its tail. All the while she hummed a cheerful tune, never once acknowledging the mountain of meat standing in her path. When she came back inside, he asked, his voice trembling with frustration, "Did you not see anything out there?" She looked him in the eye and replied sweetly, "No, my dear, nothing but dust. The yard is very clean now." That was the final straw. Mr. Spider threw his hands up in the air in utter defeat. "Enough!" he yelled, and the whole family gathered around. "So, you have all teamed up against me. You all saw the elephant, didn't you?
His wife, his sons, and his daughters all looked at him, their expressions not of triumph, but of gentle amusement. His oldest son finally spoke. "Yes, father, we saw it, but it was your kill, and we were only following your law." Mr. Spider looked at their faces, and for the first time in many years, he saw the true foolishness of his pride. He had created a law out of envy, and it had brought him nothing but frustration, while his family had united against his unfairness. He let out a long sigh, the anger draining out of him, replaced by a weary resignation. "Go," he said, a small smile finally breaking through. "Go and get the elephant." Then he looked at them all and announced, "And from this day on, the law of the empty plate is abolished. In this family, the hunter will always share in the feast." A great cheer went up, and the family worked together to prepare the grandest feast their village had ever seen. And as they sat around the fire that night, sharing the delicious meat, Mr. Spider found that the food tasted sweeter than ever before, for it was seasoned not with pride or envy, but with humility and the joy of his family.